Assalamu alaikum to all of the viewers. Hope you all are fine. Today we are going to study a very important topic by the name of how, which is the part of the WH family. So let's begin. How means kaise, right? Let's learn the definition of how. How is used to ask a question about the manner of an action, right? So let's talk about the structures of how, right? So the same WXSV is the structure of how. First, we will use W, then X, then S, and then V. W stands for how, X stands for auxiliary. Auxiliaries can be is, am, are in the present continuous tense. Then subject will be there. After subject we will use verb ing, right? We will use the verb, and in the present continuous tense we will use ing form, and then we will use complement, and at the end we must use a question mark, right? So my first example is, how is he driving the car? वो कैसे गाड़ी चला रहा है? The next example is, how are you cooking meatballs? आप कोफ्ते कैसे बना रहे हो और पका रहे हो, right? And the next example is, how am I teaching English? मैं इंग्लिश कैसे टीच कर रहा हूं? The answer must be in your comments. How can we change this structure into the simple present tense? So it is very simple. First, instead of is, am, are, we will use the auxiliaries does and do. And instead of verb ing, we will use the base form of the verb, first form of the verb. So my first example is, how does he drive the car? वो कैसे गाड़ी चलाता है? The next example is, how do you cook meatballs? आप कोफ्ते कैसे बनाते हो? And the third example is, how do I teach English? मैं इंग्लिश कैसे पढ़ाता हूँ? How can we change this structure into the simple past tense? Instead of using does, do auxiliaries, we will use the auxiliary did, and verb will remain the same. So my first example is, how did he drive the car? उसने कैसे गाड़ी चलाई थी? The next example is, how did you cook meatballs? आपने कोफ्ते कैसे बनाए थे? And the third example is, how did I teach English? मैंने आपको इंग्लिश कैसे पढ़ाया था? इससे पहले जो वीडियोस थी उनमें. Now I am using this structure into the modal auxiliary can. So instead of using did, we will use can. And can is a modal auxiliary, so it will be followed by the base form of the verb. So the verb will remain verb 1, right? My first example is, how can he drive the car? वो कैसे गाड़ी चला सकता है? The next example is, how can you cook meatballs? आप कोफ्ते कैसे पका सकते हो और बना सकते हो? And the third example is, how can I teach English? मैं कैसे इंग्लिश पढ़ा सकता हूँ? How am I teaching English? How do I teach English? How did I teach English? And how can I teach English? So hope you have learned the different translations and the different moods of how. Try to learn it. Please subscribe our channel, share it among your friends, and press the bell icon.